We have 31 people on the queue, actually already with us. So I want to start by thanking everybody for being here. This is our third webinar session. And this is a two-part session. Actually, it's called Situational Awareness, Building the Ecosystem. I want to thank also the panelists who are joining us today. I think this is going to be very interesting. I just want to say why we're doing these sessions and explain a little bit from Unblur's side. This initiative is just about creating community, creating valuable content where we can share experiences. Especially this webinar is about putting together and open the conversation to the people that creates technology for public safety and the users who are actually on the field experiencing what's going on, and then just have a little bit of the experience firsthand. We believe in integration, we believe in working together. So that's a little bit of the introduction. I wanna introduce you to the panels, the speakers that we're gonna have. So this is today. So Chris Hollis, Station Manager from Oxfordshire. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you so much. Fire and Rescue Service. Oh, Bart, that's gonna be hard. Then we have Bart van Leeuw. Bart?
Yeah, Van Leeuwen. It's a horrible name internationally, so don't worry about that.
Thank you. I'm gonna say Bart, like if we were all friends, from Netash. Very interesting company that if you don't know about, you're welcome. And then we have Richard Groom, who is actually one of our customers. Richard is a watch manager from Shropshire, and he's coming with some very interesting information as well today. We have to thank Richard especially because he came to rescue us at the last minute. We have Steve McLinden, who just joined Unblur this month. He's part of the team. Steve used to be a firefighter. I think all of you know that. So that's it on my side. I hope you enjoy it. We're gonna have Steve introducing a little bit of the webinar.
Okay, great. Thanks, Irene, and really looking forward to this session today. As Irene says, up until recently, I was leading the Transformation 2020 programme within Mid and West Wales, where we've been looking at digitising the fireground. And in doing that, we've gone through a really interesting but quite eye-opening journey over the last 4 years. And it's really great to have three different but joined up key speakers here, or panelists, who I think are going to provide quite a good insight into the different elements that we see are probably going to be required to take digitisation of the fireground from where we currently are now, which is we're starting to become aware of it. We can see that there's benefits. The technology is caught up and it's become affordable. There's also strategic drivers at a national level with the outcomes of the Grenville fire disaster and other major incidents, where the common fact is that situational awareness and information, good, reliable information being presented to assist the decision makers is absolutely vital. So it's really an exciting discussion ahead of us. So what I'm going to quickly try and do is share my screen just to confirm how the agenda is going to flow. We are looking to have a fairly relaxed conversation, and hopefully the three speakers and myself will be able to interact. Please feel free to put questions into the comments box, and we will be having a Q&A session afterwards. So as I said, we've got Chris Hollis from Oxfordshire, who's going to talk us about Esri and GIS mapping. We're then going to have Bart come in and talking about the smart data, and I'm really interested in hearing about that, because the emergence of smart buildings is a real opportunity for us as first responders, because there's a lot of vital information which we hopefully in the future will be able to draw down on. And then we're fortunate to have Richard Groom, and thanks again, Rich, for jumping in at short notice. I'm really looking forward to hearing the use of IRIS and your compare and contrast from previous incidents to how IRIS has enabled you to manage the plastics fire, which lasted for, I think, over 10 days. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is hand over to Chris Hollis. And Chris, really interested to hear about your journey with Esri and how you're using GIS data. I'm particularly keen to hear how this capability which you're developing is helping you to resolve operational incidents. So over to you, Chris.
Yep, thanks, Steve. So we've been using Esri for a couple of years now, and we started using it for our home fire safety visits and dishing out jobs in terms of where our crews needed to go to residents that needed visits, and also recording the results. And then more recently, we've looked to expand that to our building risk information gathering. Obviously, we're always looking to enhance firefighter safety as much as possible with that risk information that we provide to the crews, making sure it's as good quality as possible, as accessible as possible, and also collected in the right way. So we currently use a Samsung tablet-based solution on our appliances, which uses Survey 123 by Esri to allow information to be filled in, and then also uses another Esri app called Collector for the mapping of the hazards. So some huge benefits of using Survey 123. I mean, as with any programmable system, is that we can standardize the information that comes in, we can do risk scoring, we can eliminate a lot of human error that occurred. So the previous system was a mixture of paper-based and Microsoft Excel-based forms, which people would often interpret in different ways. Our frontline firefighters aren't trained very highly in knowing every single intricate feature of a modern building and what it means. And the survey allows us to have hints and tips, diagrams, and tip sheets and things that pop up on it to remove any doubt about what it means when they're filling it in. And we then use the Collector app to do the mapping. So we use Ordnance Survey Master Map on that, which is for those that aren't familiar with it, is the map that goes right down to quite a fine level of detail and is accurate to the shape of the buildings, which obviously is quite important for risk information. And it enables drag and drop pinpointing of hazard symbols and hazard information onto that map. We then take that information and turn that into a specific risk card for that premises, so that if the crew go to that particular factory or shop, for example, they can still get a card about that building. But a huge benefit of the system is that the map is continuous across our whole county. So what it means, while we're processing that card, which may take a day or two, the information is available on the app immediately. So if a premises that we visit was unfortunate enough to have a fire literally, say, the evening after we visit, part of our new procedures will be for the crews to always check the Collector app and look at that mapping that's available in case something's been gathered literally that day, which obviously massively improves firefighter safety, because you can never predict necessarily where these incidents will occur. It also helps us around if we have a significant incident, for example, at an industrial estate. If you find yourself wanting to know, well, what's the other side of that wall where that's being severely affected by this fire, you can actually go onto Collector, and if the information has been gathered about that neighboring premises, then you can bring that up, see what's in there as well. And we can also use it for operational planning and improvement in terms of, once we've been through one complete cycle of visiting all the premises with this system, we'll have every hazard mapped, and we'll be able to interrogate it and find out how many of certain types of hazards have we got in the county. You know, how many premises have got large fuel tanks? Have we got enough foam provision? How many places have got acetylene cylinders? Any places that perhaps our fire protection team can give some advice or some education to, by being aware really of the type of risks that we've got in the county. So it ties into quite a few things really.
I mean, that sounds really positive. I mean, I'm just wondering, from my experience of doing 7.2D in inspections, there was always quite a long, arduous process. So from the end user perspective, what type of differences have they seen, and what have you seen in relation to the quality of the data which you're gathering?
Well, we're actually just in the final trial stages at the moment, of giving it to some crews to run the two systems in parallel. But certainly it's just a lot easier for them to use. It's much more abbreviated in terms of being a software package. If it says, are there any UN classified hazardous materials, and you say no, it gets rid of half the questions. And obviously you can't do that with a paper form. You're leafing through page after page. People used to miss things on the paper forms. It also means that you can save a draft. You'll probably have experienced the same when you've been on visits, and that particular person with that area of expertise at that business isn't in that day, and they say, oh, we'll have to let you know. And you can save a draft, you can come away, and you can communicate by email or phone. You can just be waiting for that piece of information. You can also leave a note on there, so if another watch at the station or another junior officer picks it up and thinks, well, why hasn't this been submitted, they can see the note of what it's waiting for before it can be submitted. So we anticipate it's going to reduce the amount of time taken to gather the information for the crews by about 75%.
Oh, wow.
As well as making a lot of that information available immediately via that mapping system. So when they go to an incident, they can use the documents, the PDF-based documents that they've got, risk cards for premises, but they can also check that map if there's anything new. The other thing it will do is we visit all manner of premises and gather information, but the risk scoring outcome doesn't always dictate that we need a formal risk card.
Yeah.
If we go to a premises and it comes out as low risk and we've gathered any information, that will all go into this new system. Our current system, information can be accessed on request, but it can't be accessed at an incident for a premises that didn't come out at least a moderate risk. And for low risk premises, what they'll do is they'll write a couple of sentences that go onto the turnout ticket in the form of Grimfo. And this would then, on the new system, enable access of all the information that was gathered at that visit, if it's needed, which is a huge step really.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really positive. I mean, how do you envisage that this is going to enhance firefighters' safety? Do you think it's going to fundamentally change the way you operate on the fire ground, especially at the early stages when you're in that informing stage of trying to gain the situational awareness?
Yeah, I think the biggest changes it will make is information being available more quickly after a visit. As I said, if we were unfortunate enough to have an incident literally within hours of visiting somewhere, and also it will get our incident commanders more familiar with having information available. If we've got information available on a wider range of premises and they can access it on an electronic system, it will just really embed that in their approach in terms of not just what they're seeing, hearing and smelling, or anything that's handed to them at the incident, but really going and interrogating that risk information and using it. So I don't think it will fundamentally change any of the other ways that we work, but certainly the incident commanders' information gathering, we hope it will improve that in terms of them, going to the information sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so I'm assuming it's cloud-based, so it's a single source. It's not downloaded locally, or is it? How is it?
Yes. So there's a couple of different ways that Esri do it. They do their own online system that you can use, or you can have your own server. Because we're part of Oxfordshire County Council, we've got our own server with our GIS team, and we use that. So It doesn't need, the good thing is it doesn't need an internet connection to work, which
Yeah.
obviously could, we have got 4G on the tablets, but obviously there are black spots occasionally. And it enables you to gather that information. If you can't submit it, it goes into an outbox until you've got a connection. And it keeps an offline copy of all the mapping information in your immediate area.
Okay.
So our crews in Oxford City, for example, would always have that Oxford map on their tablet. Crew at another station would always have their local area map on theirs, even if they don't have a connection, which is quite good.
Yeah, because I can see it's going to, as it becomes more embedded and people see it, especially for the larger instance where appliances are coming from outside the immediate area, is this culture of people in the cab en route when they've got a bit of time with the travel, being able to look up and get a much better awareness. And very similar, as we're advocating with Iris Core, is that even though the immediate crews on scene may not be using Iris, the oncoming appliances can access it and start to get a level of situational awareness too. So in regards to, one of the things I've always found interesting with Esri is the 3D mapping on it as well for the buildings. How have you found that, and how have you used that?
The 3D mapping isn't actually something we can access with the current maps that we're using, but we have discussed it with Esri, and we'll look at that over the coming months and see whether we can do much with that really. We're quite fortunate in some ways as a county. We don't have many tall buildings. We've only got, for example, 5 residential high rises. Yeah. So a bit different to the risk that some other counties see, but it's something that we've looked at. Another thing we're quite keen to do is not change too many things at once for our crews. Yeah. Just to bring in the electronic information gathering and then start to build on it from there, really. Yeah.
I've just had just sort of pertinent to the conversation which we're having now. I've just seen there's a question from Jim Martin, which I think that's Jim from the Fire Service College. So his question is there a QA process before the information goes live service-wide? One of my tasks when I was in service was QA72D and SSRI forms. How does that work for you, or how are you envisaging on doing that?
Yes, there is. So that's the reason why the formal risk card for the building can take at least a couple of days, depending on when the information comes in, because the card itself for the building goes through that QA process. So it goes from the crew to their station commander to give it the once over. It then comes into us and we give a more generic review of the document to make sure we think it's user friendly and the information on there is useful for the crews and we don't feel there's anything missing.
Yeah.
So that's to produce the formal card. If we did then have any issues, we would change those issues in the electronic system prior to producing the card. But it does mean that the information that's gathered while the QA is taking place is available through the Esri apps in the case of an incident. So it strikes that balance really between speed of availability of the information and ultimately that QA check that does happen to make sure the information on there is good.
Okay, I just want, again, another area of interest is obviously this type of data comes into its own when we have a larger multi-agency incident. How do you envisage that data being shared with other agencies?
Well, first of all, we're looking to as closely as we can connect this system up to Resilience Direct, because we use Resilience Direct at the moment and all our neighbouring services do, and there's a new agreed southeast approach for mapping of risks where we'll put all of our risks onto that system and then it enables our neighbours to collect what they need, make that available on their own IT platforms, because obviously we're all slightly different. Yeah. The other side to that is that if we have a significant enough incident that we decide to stand up I believe they call it a response page on Resilience Direct, we can then pull all that information into it. And we can all, with the way the permissions work on Resilience Direct, we can just make anyone who's got access to that response page have the required permissions to access that information. And that's where mapping, say, an entire industrial estate into collector really comes into its own. Because when you've got something significant going on there, you can share that with all the partner agencies that need it by the response page. And that could be from things as simple as contact information for a premises down to the hazards that they've got there if the incident escalates.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like a really strong platform, and it seems like a very logical and straightforward approach too. And I think again is one of the challenges that I found over my tenure over the last 4 or 5 years is it's all very well and okay when you're looking after your own data, but when you try and sort of harvest the broader data, you then get difficulties. And I think that sort of segues in quite nicely to Bart, in relation to one of the challenges we find is the different types and the different standards that data is collected to. So Bart, if I hand over to you, and really just what I'm really interested to hear about is the work that you're undertaking, but also with the sort of new technologies coming through, what are the challenges you see, and how are you looking to overcome them with regards to the different standards and the different types of data, and how can we get to a point where we know, one, we can access the data we need, but two, are we sure the data is reliable and robust?
Yeah. Sure, let me see if I can share my screen. Did that work?
It works.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my name is Bart van Leeuwen, like I said before. Horrible last name for being international, but there's nothing I can do about that. I'm the owner of NetEdge, and we do smart data for smarter firefighters. We've been in business for more than 25 years, focusing on the fire service for the last 14 years, and have been very active in open government data standards globally for W3C, done some stuff with the ODI in the UK, currently working on some project with NFPA, all on data standards. And we try to operate on the edge of science and engineering. I have a guest professorship, as they call it, at the VU University in Amsterdam on the Knowledge and Media Group, where we talk about human-computer interfaces, human-centric AI, explainable AI, and all these kind of things, which I think are super applicable for the fire service. And I wear a helmet from time to time as well. I'm a career firefighter at the Amsterdam Fire Department for almost 20 years now in various roles. So I bring this whole array of understanding what the implications are of data standards, AI, and firefighting in one package. And so have a couple of other people on our team that do that. So this is brought together by something that I started to express as my fear. I'm afraid that something will happen to me, or either one of my colleagues or the people we serve, and that on hindsight, we will figure out, oh, we could have prevented that if we had the proper information. And mind you, this fear was expressed almost 10 years ago for the first time. When I went to the board of commanders of the Amsterdam Fire Department, at that point in time, they looked at me and like, we have no idea what you talk about. Data, what do you mean? And we just recently had in the Netherlands some big open data sets. Some of these people probably didn't write their own emails, and I tried to convince them that we need to do more with data in the fire service. So I started my own journey and just started doing things. And this is my first data-driven solution. And I was a lot less gray back then, as you can see in this picture. So that was in December 2009 that I installed this in my fire station back in Amsterdam, where we were sort of experimenting. Okay, what if we could get the bare minimum of information to the firefighters just before they turn out, in this sort of 10 seconds of tranquility, as I call it, before the truck raises sirens and everything. And then I started looking more in, okay, what is our problem actually? And that is what I started to call my challenge. And we started looking at technology to solve this. In Amsterdam, we have about 4 minutes to make it to the premise where we have an alarm. And there's a lot of things going through your head if you do that. And you would like to gather as much information as possible, but in the meantime, you have to dress up and everything. So there's a lot of things that go through your head, and there is really complicated to structure your thoughts. And what we see, if we look at in the Netherlands, the situation, if we look at what do we want to know about certain buildings, this is a picture drawn off from a project done by the Dutch Physical Safety Institute. These are all different data sets who have features and characteristics of buildings who are relevant to the fire service. And the traditional way would be, well, you can look up all these data sets, you can throw up map layers and whatever. And my thought was really, if I'm standing in this particular position, do I really go and check on an iPad what's wrong with that building? And I think socially it's not accepted if the fire truck pulls up in front of your burning house that they're going to spend 2 minutes on their iPads looking at stuff. So how can we make sure that all the information available is utilized by the firefighters? And my first goal was, okay, how can we access this information? How can we structure this, and how can we bring this together? So we started looking at some of the traditional ways of creating data warehouses, data sets, or map layers with everything on that. And then we started to realize, well, we're not really sure that that is the end goal. So how do we move forward? And one of the things we came across was the whole graph data model, which is used by the Facebooks and the Googles of this world to structure these massive amounts of information and drag intelligence out of that. And it takes a different approach. So the traditional way, this is some data models we created, for example, for a house inspection project for the NFPA, where you say, oh, you have various tables where you have a data model which has IDs and locations of what you checked, which units were there, and what advice was given, et cetera, et cetera. And if you would take a single instance, you would still have these multiple tables or tabs in your Excel sheet where you need to combine all this information. And this is really hard to digest for a human. But if we would take a simple story out of this, it would be a lot easier for people to extract it. So October 9, 2018, we performed a house visit, et cetera. So I'm not gonna read this out completely, but you get this. If you would tell this to someone, this will stick, not the 3 tables. And if you would break this down in statements, then it's like this. And the interesting thing about these statements is that the order is actually not that relevant. You can read them in any order, but it's pure and simple statements. And this is the basis of a graph data model, which is standardized since 2001 by W3C, the RDF graph data model, which is behind a lot of the smart technologies and the AI technologies which you see around in the world today. So if you would graph this out, and this is the idea of the graph particular, this is how that would sort of look. And you can see, you can take any of the nodes as a start point and figure out how everything is connected. And that is exactly what I would like to have when I go to this fire in this 4 minutes. The information out there should be connected instead of, well, just cloud of thoughts everywhere. So we have been playing around with various tools within various exercises and various projects for various fire departments around the world. And 3 years ago, we started to combine all this technology in something which we call Fire Graph, which is our knowledge graph for the fire service. And knowledge graph technology is, instead of creating tables and tables of data, it's trying to capture the knowledge. And as everybody probably on this call will recognize, the fire service is a knowledge-driven organization. We gain experience because we gain this knowledge through experience. So we have been through all these incidents. We've learned from the elders at the firehouse, et cetera, et cetera. So why don't we use a system that was basically designed to capture knowledge and to express knowledge on a way that we can actually use it later in smart technologies? And that was our idea. Let's think about this information architecture at the back end before we start building all sorts of fancy looking stuff. Let's look at how can you combine data sets on a knowledge level instead of, well, just throw some tables together and we hope it works. And it still works like a traditional system. So this is a detailed map of Amsterdam where you can click a building, and where traditional geospatial interfaces would say, oh, select the data layers you want to see about this building. We have the knowledge graph in the backend, so we can pick any of the addresses. And when we look at that, then we get all the data sets, all the relevant incidents we had there, et cetera, from that. And in the backend, this looks like a graph, and you can click through all the information in the backend system in various databases from public institutions or stuff you downloaded, or in this case, even our dispatch system is real-time integrated into that. So This is not going to be used, obviously, in the fire engine. Could be at incident command at a later stage that people's going to scroll through this. But what we do have, for example, is these screens at the fire station, which are all driven by this knowledge graph, so that you have all the information available for you, so that we have this coherent set of data, and now go to the fire and be well informed. And then my second fear came. It's like, okay, first of all, I was like, there is not enough data to support us, but we're 10 years ahead, and there is so much data that you have to think from a situational awareness perspective. You just have data overflow. And my fear sort of is reworded in, I'm afraid we run into a situation that you could have known. There's so much information out there. Why didn't you act upon it? Well, like I said, we're not in the luxury position in this high risk, high consequence environment to have a sort of a meeting and figure out what is all the data we need. We just have to make decisions and do things. Now, suddenly you see all sorts of AI solutions popping up. And I started looking at that. Okay, some of these solutions are more solutions looking for problems. So people have applied AI to large data sets and thought, hey, it might work for the fire service if we can find a problem that matches what we can do with data. And I thought, that doesn't work. And some of these solutions is like, we're going to tell the fire service based on the data what they need to do. And that didn't feel right for me, but it took a bit of time for me to realize where this problem was. And I thought, what are our problems? And if you look at this, picture in the center and the background, you see a scorched building with broken glass, and the two firefighters sitting on the front look at each other like, what on earth did just happen? And the guy on the right basically broke the glass with his hands. That's why he has a bandage on his finger, and crawled out there. And he feared for his life. He basically said his last prayers, like, I'm not going to make it out alive. And the other one followed him shortly after. The reason they have this expression on their face, like, what on earth happened? If you look closely in the rest of the street, all these houses are similar. More particular, in this area of the city, probably 90% of the housing stock is the same. And they were bewildered, like, how on earth can we be caught in a fire and be surprised in a thing we actually thought that we know, because we have tons of these houses. And I started looking at reports and where firefighters got in trouble or even got killed. And there was a sort of a red line through it. And we didn't expect that. We didn't expect the floor to cave in. We didn't expect to be the building a lot larger. So every firefighter, either a volunteer or a career or professional, no matter how you call it, has a certain set of professional skills and goes to a fire with these professional skills. They get in trouble if they run into a situation where it is not what they expect. And this is the actual building we talked about where the fire was. So what was the unexpected? These houses are traditionally small. So now that people have a bit more money and Amsterdam becomes a hotspot, people are combining floors. So you can see that the three windows are in general a house, but sometimes they do 2 floors above each other or go side by side. The 2 buildings, so the gray one at the bottom with the gray on the bottom and the one on the right of it, was completely remodeled on the inside. So from the inside, it didn't look anything like any of the other buildings in the same area. And there was actually a basement added to one of these buildings where there was a sleeping room. That caught them by surprise because they were finding themselves at the top end of a chimney, which every firefighter knows is not going to work. This was for me revelation. Like, we need to find ways to signal firefighters that what they're going to is not what they expect, and then have this sort of stomach breathing step, take this one step at a time approach, like looking at it like, am I seeing, or is what I'm seeing, does that match with my mental image that I created through situational awareness, or did something change? And one of the problems we've seen is the data quality you get from a lot of these public data sets, but even we had it in the previous speakers, even the quality of the data you generate yourself, you cannot guarantee 100%. So instead of trying to get to 100% quality of data, maybe we should rethink the way we look at data in a way it's always somewhat off. So that the smart technology we're going to use on top of that is not going to tell us exactly what needs to be done, because, well, the data is not capable of doing that, but maybe give us some hints where things might be a little different. So what we are currently working on, and what works pretty well with even the poor quality of data we have in some places, could we create systems that, based on an address you go to, give you a digital tap on the shoulder, say, this is not what you think. And we've done some tests in Amsterdam, and I could demo it, but I didn't want to do a live demo in a session like this, where you could basically click on a building and tells you, this is not as what you would expect in this neighborhood. It's either larger, it's older, it's higher, it's lower, whatever. To give firefighters this idea of like, hey, be aware, it's not what you expect. I'm not going to tell you exactly what's going on. I just want to make sure you are aware. So instead of AI trying to tell firefighters exactly what they need to do, AI needs to be there to assist the professional. Firefighters go out, be professional to this fire, and they now and then need a somebody or a something that taps them on the shoulder. It's like, hey, watch out, or you need to reevaluate this, and then leave it up their professional situation, coming on the scene and say, oh, I've looked at this, I can handle this. Oh, wow, I didn't expect that. We need to change our initial plans we made while en route. So I'm talking a lot about data, and that was one of the other things, and I couldn't come up with any slides for this. It's like, what we need to do is, the whole fire service is talking about data. I was at Fire Rescue International 2 years ago when that was still possible. I did a data class and asked the soon-to-be captains and lieutenants and the sort of lower rank fire officers in there, before you took on this job to do the tests, was there a computer skill test? There was only one person in a room of about 80. It's like, okay, but you think data is important, but they didn't do a computer skill test. How many of you have a data science background? None. They all had mechanical engineering, fire protection engineering, public administration, business administration, but there was no fire officer in there who had a data science bachelor or master or anything like that. And then I asked them, if you hire new recruits, do you submit them to a computer test? Do you do any sort of digital literacy tests with your new recruits? None of them. But we still want this fire service to be data driven. We want firefighters to run into smart buildings and understand the implications of all this technology, but we're not hiring for them. I think that is one of the biggest challenge we need to start doing. And especially if you talk about fire officers, if you want to take a data science class, it's probably going to take you 4 years. So how do we going to bridge this gap other than hiring in non-firefighters who have a data science background? So that was the things I wanted to share, and I am open to questions. So my fear is a little less. I'm capable of sharing it with you guys. So I'm happy I got this opportunity, and I look forward to any discussion around this.
Thanks, Bart. I was just messaging Irene. I think I've got about 5 hours worth of questions for you, because there's so many points which you've raised there. I think it's really interesting, the approach you're taking with AI. There is a common misconception of AI, especially within the fire service, that it's going to take over. And I think you've made the point exactly as how myself, through my project, and definitely Unblur, is AI is an assistant. It's another tool. It's something that declutters and surfaces data, but the human element is still the most important part. You've got to have that that human decision-making capability there. I think also it resonates in relation to what Chris was talking about the mapping and the geospatial information. And what you're talking about is taking wider data sets and bringing them in, because our data and the data that Chris was talking about is going to focus mainly on known risks. Your data sets may present the unknown risks. And I think, again, there's a lot of discussion around that. I think also the HMI, the human machine interface, is a really interesting dynamic, and something we need to be mindful now, because what's your views on, with all this different data coming into the hands of the operational firefighters, do you think that there's the risk of distraction, or it's going to change the way they work?
Yes, so some people actually 10 years ago, some UX people came to me. It's like, what does your ideal user interface for these kind of systems look like? And I said, if you talk about operational firefighters, not incident commanders, but the guys sitting in a fire truck riding to an incident, I want to have a big screen with a big enough font with only 5 lines, because from all the situational awareness results research, we know that we can only remember 5 things. And I want to have at a maximum 5 taps on my shoulder. It's the building is very long or deep. I have no clue how you say that specifically in English. So long attack lines, maybe hazardous materials or something like that. 5 lines, no fancy graphics, no nothing. 5 things in a big enough font that even the older firefighters with poor eyesight can read it in the middle of the night. Because you laugh about it, but we have tablets in the trucks in Amsterdam with 8-point fonts. I have a vision of an eagle. I have no problem with that, but now and then you see older guys just handing over the tablet to some others. I have no clue what's on there because I can't read it. These simple things. And I really think that we should make this bridge that firefighters are professionals. They need to train. And that was one of the questions I had for Chris. It's like, do you actually do exercises on using this data in your academy or in your training ground, et cetera, that people can actually play with data? Because that's one of the other things. Is like you see tons of fire trucks with tablets, but nobody is using it in a training ground. At least we don't do it.
That's one of the things we've been trying to work on. One of our biggest challenges really is changing the culture in terms of getting people to use the platform. So we've been gradually pointing out to crews and trying a few things out, that the information that you've got there is really, really useful for exercises, even if it's just a tabletop. And we've had some recent success with some firefighters who are working towards becoming incident commanders, where colleagues have used that information. The other side of my role is national operational guidance. So they've used that information, national operational guidance scenarios, which are effectively an interactive aid memoir of information sources and things you need to think about and hazards and so on, alongside risk data for a real building. And they've given that person a tabletop or a drill in the yard at the station, and they've used that real data to provide the injects, and then used the operational guidance as a tick list of, have they thought about everything or most of the things that are on here? And the more, I'm a firm believer in, the more we get people to use that platform and the more familiar they become with it, the more they're likely to use it in the real world. So yeah, we're definitely embedding that in our approach.
Okay.
And the feedback's really positive so far. One of the guys I suggested it to came back and said, yeah, that's worked really well. I never would have thought to do that. And actually it's given us a really good training scenario.
I think, Chris, you've really touched on a really important point there. And again, through my experiences, it's all very well and very easy to get lost in the technology and seeing how good the tech is, the hardware and everything else. And one thing we always kept putting back to is the end user's got to be at the center. All this capability is brilliant, but it's pointless and useless if the end user doesn't use it. And as Bart said, how many appliances have got a tablet, which is a vital tool, but nobody uses it because it's not in the right format, or they haven't had the training, or it's not a condition to, you have to use it. So I think, again, that's been a really sort of interesting insight into the AI-wide side of things. But I think your slide of the fire engine with all the balloons coming up is probably one of the best illustrations of the complexity and the mindset of things. So I might have to ask if I can have a copy of that, because it will come in handy. But what I'd like to do now is invite Richie to come on to this discussion. And I'm really interested, for those of you who don't know, Shropshire attended an incident which was I think it's one of the longest protracted jobs which Shropshire have had. And we we were really fortunate that they were able to use the Iris platform throughout the incident. So I'm going to invite Rich to just give an overview of the incident. And what I'm really interested to do is that my service, Mid and West Wales, about 10 years ago, had a very similar job with an abandoned warehouse, which ties in with what you were saying, Bart, with a building that looked like it did one thing, was actually full of scrap tyres. And we had very much the similar challenges that Rich has gone through. And hopefully we'll have a discussion, Rich, about some of the challenges that we found and how you found them using the Iris platform. So I'll hand over to you now just to give us an overview and then hopefully have a chat.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So as you've alluded to, within Shropshire, this is probably the largest protracted incident we've had for some time in terms of longevity, so just shy of 4 weeks. And the complexity of the site, which meant that it was a redundant site, so it no longer worked as a recycling packaging process plant anymore. So the process packages of bales were left in situ within a large building, steel building, roller shutters all confined, but also the geography of the site, with additional bales scattered around the site, made it very difficult for crews just to basically pull the stock out, be able to put a process in of wetting and then move it around the site. Just because of the nature of the waste, it wasn't able to go off site. So we were able to process it on site. So in terms of our platform, we were lucky enough to link up with Unblur probably the end of 2019. And just as COVID started hitting us going into 2020, we started to roll it out onto the command support function on our new vehicle. Bit of background: ourselves, Shropshire and Hereford and Worcester purchased 3 incident command vehicles, and the interoperability between the 2 services. We've both got the same platform, and we're able to integrate each other's, I suppose, procedures. So daily, we're on with chats with Hereford and Worcester. We're able to integrate our services and align for a strategic alliance, both our platforms to enable. So, for an example, the Environment Agency, when on site, just because of the scale of the smoke plume, we required drone footage for the site to enable our partners to share information to the wider audience, the local communities in which the fire was based. So we were able to call on the services from Hereford and Worcester utilising their drone. And myself, as an end user, I was working from home and doing my normal. I was able to set up a camera via Hereford and Worcester's drone, link it into our platform. So we were able to have a live stream of the drone footage via the platform. And being web-based, I was able to do all this do at home, but obviously it fed back into the significant incident room back at headquarters. So the TCG, SCG that was developed and created for the incident. The strategic approach was that we were able to work with our partners and assist in the sharing of information without actually being on the incident ground. So for the wider strategic approach, it greatly assisted with this matter. As an end user, we can say we've been fortunate enough to work with Unblur, through the early beginnings of it, and we've been able to develop it as we go. So the integration of the Tactics app that's come on board on our vehicle, we're able to carry 6 tablets. So these tablets are going to then, the vision is, can go into each individual sectors, and we're able to utilise the camera function on the tablets. So in liaison with the sector commander, he can then live stream video footage due to the geography of sites. It's more prudent just to be able to video it and its live streams back to the incident commander. And again, this could also feed back into our partner agencies that are stood up in the significant incident room. So I can't what's the word I'm looking for? I suppose but the platform itself has just greatly enhanced Shropshire's ability to share information, multi-agency and multi-partners for work really, and sharing of information.
I think, Rich, I mean, it's really interesting to when you talk about through the use of drones and the sector cameras, you were able to share and see the incident. One of the challenges we had with the Henlys fire within Mid and West Wales, and at the time I was seconded to Welsh Government as Assistant Fire and Rescue Advisor, so we had a lot of ministerial and partner interest. And one of the things that I struggled with was that me being able to get a good handle of the incident, the size, the scale, the complexities, especially as traditional media outlets weren't allowed anywhere near that. So in regards to using the platform and the information which you had, how did you see, or how did you find the ability to brief other agencies who may not have had direct access to the platform?
Yeah, so being a cloud-based system, so not only agencies and partners, officers. So because of the longevity of the scale of the protractedness of the incident, there's a rolling rota of officers that are coming in daily. So the officers are able to view the platform, view any information, any analytical risk assessments, any decision logs that have taken place in the days leading up to their arrival. I think it's gone to underestimate the importance that they've got that situational awareness before they actually even arrive on the incident ground. So just the time saving in briefing of officers and briefing of crews ultimately, everything's it's all in one place, it's all logged down, and people can view it live, before even getting into the incidents. Yeah,
because I mean, one of the things we found too is that I think ours lasted for about 3 or 4 weeks by the time we got the recycling done and got it moved. But one of the issues was about maintaining resources there, especially from the command and control side of things. The service at the time only had one ICU, and there wasn't really anywhere around there that could lend itself, and it was so the systems. Yes, how did that work for you guys?
Yeah, so that's a good point actually, Steve. So the incident command unit was on site for the first initial 2 days, and then because of the system and its capabilities, we were able to utilise the on-site office. We took ownership of the office on site. We were able to get internet connection, power into the office, and it just meant that we could send the ICU back to its home station to be available for further significant incidents or large-scale incidents. But all we required as a command support function was 2 members of personnel from the team with a laptop, a handheld radio, and we were able to provide a command support function for the following 4 weeks. So not only did it leave a vehicle on the run for all the significant incidents, we were still able to provide a full command support function during that. And yourself with over 4 weeks, the analytical risk assessments, the amount of paperwork that's created of these incidents historically. All this now is on one platform now, and the fact that at the end of an incident we can close the incident down. It'll download a log of a PDF of all the messages that can then go to inform, to assist debriefs going forward and possibly investigations. Every decision log, it's all in one place. There's no scraps of paper anymore, no whiteboards to be kept. It's all in one place.
So you just touched on it there about obviously the investigations and the debriefs. Have you started to work through that yet?
No, so we're formulating a structured debrief at present. We'll be going through a strategic gap analysis through our national operational guidance with the waste fires. So we'll go through that side of things first, and then we can pull all the information that we've got out of the platform to start developing our structured debriefs.
So during the incident then, obviously, especially in the early stages, there's going to be a lot of information available from outside of the fireground, from the Business Fire Safety Environment Agency. Yeah. Were you able to get that data put into the system?
Yeah, so our SharePoint site for Shropshire Fire is also in the cloud, so we were able to pull our risk management system plans off. And the beauty of Iris is that you can actually overlay the floor plans and things straight into the system onto our mapping. So we were able to do that, and I think, you know, hopefully for the future, with the liaison and developing the software, we can, you know, start importing, you know, different sort, you know, forms into it. Like things like GISMapping, for example, just integrating more forms, so everything is all in one place.
So have you had any feedback from end users, from firefighters who've been exposed to it?
Yeah, so obviously it came at a time where COVID started kicking in. So I was able to actually run training programs live by Teams, do a demonstration, and then being cloud-based, people can operate it. They can go into it and operate it and use it at their leisure, basically. So then, touching back on Chris's and Bart about the training side of things, we're planning to start linking into our level 2 training scenarios. So every level 2 officer and above will come into the development centre to do their XVR sessions. We're actually going to link now with the command support function with the Iris platform. So not only do the officers get the exposure to the platform, but the command support crew themselves at the station are able to to keep in tune and keep on top of the platform and the developments and the use of it.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, one of the things that we learned from our experiences is that the incident continues far beyond the physical presence side of it, and it was quite an arduous task to be able to access the information that had been collected in the right order. So from what you were saying, now the incident's closed, you've got the chronological timeline. So as people have been asking for data, have you found that process has been easier? Yeah,
so much more simplified now. So like I say, it is all in one place. We haven't got AIA forms going to ops departments. We haven't got invoices going to everything. We can scan any invoices from contractors that are going off site daily for processing of the water. For example, we can scan invoices on them and add them into the system, so as an overlay. So everything, it's all in one place. We haven't got to go all over the service and departments to get this information.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's really good that you've been able to use Iris in a way that it's been designed to be used. I think from my point of view, we're probably at that tipping point of where mobile phones and smartphones and apps were 4 or 5 years ago. Everybody's becoming aware of it, but doesn't quite see how it relates to them or what use it would be to them. Then they start to use it, and I'm guessing from my experience of introducing Iris into my old service and your experience, Rich, you're probably at that point of scratching and going, how did we ever manage to deal with incidents before the tech?
Yeah, exactly. And you touch on with the mobile phones. Obviously, the mobile phones that the officers carry now, it's going to link into the system. They'll sign in as a functional role for that incident. For example, safety officer. And with that, we know exactly who's on the incident ground, where they are on the incident ground due to its GPS. They're able to tap into a live stream, and the vision for the future is to start filling in ARA forms and things on the tablets and devices that we carry.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I mean, and thank you for the insight. I think it's been really interesting. I think we're sort of getting to the point now of moving on to questions. We've got one from Martin Collins, which I'll ask, which I think is to Chris. But please feel free to ask questions using the question button there. Otherwise, it will just be me asking questions, and I'm sure yours are far more insightful than mine. So Chris, the question which you got is, have you thought of using the NLPG gazetteer data to highlight generic risks on your map? If, for example, whilst doing your risk visit, you identify that a property that classifies level as within a particular property type, e.g. a car repair centre, are highly likely to have acetylene users, then why not preemptively put an acetylene question mark symbol on the premises? So I suppose the question there is, does the system have the ability to it's almost like using the national operational guidance scenarios. If you've got this, you may want to consider that.
Yes, that's a really interesting question and idea from Martin. It sounds like he's familiar with the platforms that we're using, and we do use NLPG as our initial source of data on premises. We haven't taken it quite that far yet. We've got an excellent GIS team within Oxfordshire County Council that comprises several individuals who can actually do programming and scripting of the system as well. So we've certainly got options like that open to us. At the moment, we're using the NLPG primarily to sort of sift the properties that we've got, prioritize our visits to the properties to gather the information. And you mentioned the NOG scenarios. We're taking a very much a NOG approach now in terms of what they call their all hazards approach that you're probably familiar with. That the training that our operational staff receive would already support them in making that cautious assumption that there may be a particular type of hazard in a particular type of premises. And coming back to something that Bart said about the unexpected. So our ethos at the moment for having a formal risk card is very much, is there something about this car garage that you wouldn't expect, which maybe in future that it's got to settle in because a lot of them are getting rid of it now. Is there something about this building it's particularly large, this particular house has got a basement and you don't expect it? That's very much the ethos behind some of our information gathering. And the NLPG is currently helping us to make sure that we've got out to all these places that may have something like that, or are more likely to have something like that we need to look at and we need to capture. And we've got some meetings lined up with our GIS team in the wider county council, just to look at how else we can use the data, whether they can automate anything for us. I think we would probably have to pick our most significant hazards in doing that, like the acetylene, because if you go wide enough with the data, and this comes back onto some of what Bart said, if you go wide enough with the data, then ultimately you could have every single type of triangle piled on top of it because the system knows the building construction type. So it's got a question mark for that. It knows the business type. It's got some question marks for that. So we'd have to be quite cautious with it, but I think it's a really, really interesting idea and definitely something that I'll mention to the team when we meet up to look at the way forward with the data.
Yeah, I think that sort of ties in as well with the last bit about too much layers of information. And Bart, if I can come to you, I think there is this element of potential information overload and distraction. How do you see the AI being developed so that if you start getting a premise type and a range of data coming through, is there work going on to be able to try and anticipate based on the information that's being put in, maybe live on top of the gathered data, on how to filter that and surface it?
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to go and look at, and there's some work being done, is that you need to go and look at the more context sensitive information. Most systems nowadays do not take in the context of what the call actually is. So if you go to a certain building and either we do quite a bit of assistance of ambulance or a cat in a tree or whatever, or a fire, the information you get is always the same, where context and the type of information you would need is definitely different. And we've been doing some experiments with using what the dispatchers type in their logbook, and can we sort of use AI to detect what they're talking about and then find the SOPs and SOGs that go with these kind of things. And I think that would be where you want to have AI help you filter this information, but always in a way that it would sort of be aligned with your general procedures. I heard a term I haven't heard before, but we have in the Netherlands, we have sort of a acronym where you, as an incident commander, you want to tick all the boxes in this acronym. But none of the applications I've seen actually allow you to use the application to tick any of the boxes. So these kind of mergers you need to see. So you train your incident commanders to go through certain procedures, then information providing solutions like AI or whatever should sort of be aligned with these boxes, basically. And I think that is the next step that needs to be done, but partly because we as a fire service have a problem sort of explaining what we want. So if you talk to any incident commander, what information do you want? His answer is probably going to be everything.
Yeah.
Well, no, you don't. But so and that's what the statement I tried to make with, we need to educate the people we bring on board as well, or make sure that we get the right level of qualifications in our ranks to be able to articulate what we really need from these systems instead of, well, because I see that at my own fire station, there's these young people who are very familiar with their phone, but they think that AI and all these things have mythical proportions.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't. So we need to have these conversations. What do you need? How do you think? What are your limitations as a human being operating on the fire ground? And how can AI assist you instead of, well, we just give you some cool blinking thing and that will help you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's funny you should say about how if you ask a firefighter to design something, you will get the Rolls Royce diamond encrusted with an extra aerial and a couple of sockets on it to make it work. And one of the things we learned through our journey, and it was really much part of the discussion we initially had with Alfonso and the team at Unblur, is my first sort of starting point was, you've seen Star Trek and all the stuff that they can do. We want that. And then it was a very grown-up discussion, right? Okay, what's the challenge you're trying to fix? And one of the sort of approaches we always took is, technology is not always the right answer. There may be the systems which you got are probably the best they're going to be. So why complicate it by putting technology and a digital approach onto it? So I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things we said is that as the innovators and the leads of this digital journey, our role was to do the R&D and to get to the point of, right, we understand the challenge we're trying to solve, or the gap we're trying to fill. We then do the research, and then we present it to the end user saying, right, here's the choices, because otherwise you end up it going from being quite a focused thing to growing and growing and growing, and you miss the actual point of what you're trying to do. I've just got another question here from Kyle Chapman saying, how as services do we bring solutions like IRIS and risk assessments together, because they're often very much separate entities? I'll offer up to Rich there, because your experience with using the IRIS platform, for those attendees on the webinar who are not familiar, the IRIS core platform actually has an inbuilt ARA capability, which is directly linked to the National Operational Guidance Standard scenario. So, Richard, do you want to just expand upon that?
Yeah, so like you said, and Chris alluded to earlier, that our analytical risk assessments are linked in with the NOC scenarios. So as a service, we're currently aligning to obviously a single source best practice throughout the service. So the ARAs were quite important to us. So not only has it got the standard risk assessments for all scenarios, but also anything additional we're able to create as well. So anything that's not being thought of, or anything additional to a specific incident, we're able to create new risk assessments and control measures for.
Great stuff. So just one final question for me, because I don't think we've got any final questions on the system, is really just drawing back to the AI element of it, because I know it's something that we in Unblur are focusing on, because we want to try and give the incident commander as much time and space as we can, so that they can create and assess the most accurate data. What do you see the biggest human risks are with this emerging technology? And I'll ask that initially to Bart, where you've been looking to introduce AI. What have you factored in regard to the human-machine interface? And Rich, would be interesting to hear from your experience when using IRIS, whether there were any unintended consequences or activities that happened which you weren't expecting?
Oh, there's a whole lot to process. I think the first thing is that if you see some of the really cool user interfaces that being built right now, augmented reality, etc., and heads-up displays for firefighters, that my fear with these kind of things is really, okay, then people might concentrate what's going on the inside of their mask, where their real danger is actually on the other side of the mask. That you end up that people start to trust the AI in such a way that they do not take the signals and do not trust their senses anymore on what's really going on at the fire ground. So I think that every time AI system comes into play, it should have a huge maybe or whatever around it it is not taken for granted. This is the truth and the whole truth, but well, this might be a signal or something. I think that is a big risk. And so in society, you actually see that teenagers kill themselves over messages on Facebook. So they trust so much that image that being built there. From a digital platform, do you really want a firefighter to sort of walk in that same line? So I think that is where a real challenge lies on how do you formulate the outputs of AI systems in a way that they are being taken upon.
I think I totally agree with you, but I think for me, I've always seen the introduction of AI and it's surfacing it is almost like the site blockers you have on a firewall, where you go to do something and it goes, whoa, do you really want to do that? Just to give that sort of pause to say, are you actually sure? But not saying, no, you mustn't do it. Because again, we've got to keep the human at the center. So Rich, from your experience of using the system, has there been any unexpected outcomes?
Not as such. I think more of a risk going forward is a potential for managers to be able to use this platform to manage incidents, remotely from the incidents. I think, like I say, the human element side of things still need to be in control of the actual incidents. But I think the risk going forward is we need to get the training and exposure across to the managers to say, look, this is not a platform for you to remotely manage an incident. Yeah, it gives you a great platform for the sharing of information and the wealth of knowledge before coming on scene or to speak with other partners. But I think that the real danger is managing remotely of an incident. So like I say, the human element is still at the forefront of the scenes, really.
I must admit, when we first introduced drones in my service and we started to share the live streaming via YouTube, I had to have one of those career-defining conversations with one of my principal officers, sort of encouraging them not to take part in the incident from their lounge. So there is a real risk there. I think also one of the things that we're very mindful of through the work we've been doing is about the phenomenon of decision paralysis, where people get used to having thermal imaging, internal tracking, biometrics, telemetry, cameras. Then suddenly, if one of those elements aren't there, are they going to be less inclined to make a decision? And that's why we've always said with any technology, it's just another tool. It's just but the core functions have to be there. You have to be able to effectively manage an incident without any tech, because tech is reliable, but something could happen, and it could be a silly thing. They haven't charged the tablet up, so suddenly you're expecting it, and it is there. We've had another question, which I did see it, but I can't see where it's gone now. There was
it's on the answer side. As
okay.
Bart, he answered by
you've done
by
that.
text, but I think we can do it live if Bart doesn't mind.
Yeah. So Bart, I don't know if you want to just.
Yes. So I made this remark. It's like my sort of my dream interface is going to be these 5 lines in big enough font, and then the question was, what should be in these 5 lines? And I think that is the challenge. Like, how do you pick the information that is most relevant in that point in time and context where you go to? And how do you create a system that can actually assist you with the 5 things that you need to know? So it's not that I've made something like that. If I already did, then I probably would have been selling it worldwide. But I think that is the direction where we need to go in trying to figure out what are the 5 most important things people en route need to know. And I think that the challenge is also, what are the 5 most important things for the first unit? What are the 5 most important things for the second unit? What are the 5 most important things for the 10th unit that arrives? Because that's going to change, because what you're going to do in that incident is going to change over and over. So I don't have a fixed answer. It's like, oh, tick these boxes and then my problems are solved. But I think the challenge is, like, how do you gonna limit it to 5 things? Because especially for the first arriving units, that's all you can deal with in your mind in the higher risk, high consequence environment that you operate in.
I think, Bart, I mean, that's a really good answer. I think also it sort of raises the question where the AI could step in, because when you say the top 5 things that the first appliance needs to know are going to be generally fairly set because it's the learned behaviors, whereas you wouldn't want the 10th appliance coming on going through those same questions, because those answers should have been dealt with. So it's about, can the AI pick up on the actions or the information that's being added, the real-time stuff, to then present the top 5 things you might want to think about for the oncoming appliances, which I'm sure from a data sciences point of things, a really easy thing to do. So probably not.
Yeah, that's the hard part in our business. Everybody thinks, oh, that's easy. Well, famous last words is my answer in general.
Yeah, I've just got a final question from Alfonso from Unblur, and it's something that we've talked about and something that we experience within our service, and I'm sure that Chris and Rich would have had it too, is over the last 10 years or so, we've introduced thermal imaging cameras for our breathing apparatus teams. And what we found during training in complex buildings, that if you took the camera off them halfway through, you suddenly found that they weren't as aware of where they were, because they'd become dependent on the tech. And it's interesting that, and again, open to Chris and Rich and Bart for your views on this, is how do you see, or how important is the training part of it? And how do you see the training looking? Is it, because we always train for success, as in it's always going to work. Should we be training for failure too? So you've got it, but now you haven't got it. So Rich, what's your views on that?
Yeah, I think that goes down to the culture of the service as well. We here in your training environment, as you've said, tech is in addition to your skills, to your background knowledge. I don't think you can always rely on it. Tech can fail, and when tech fail goes in the field or within incidents, you're relying on your own basic knowledge. So skills fade. I think if you're relying on tech too much, you're going to get your skills fade, going back to your basics. So I think we've always got to plan for the worst, and then build up from there, and just gradually introduce tech as an additional support.
Excellent. Chris, from your point of view with introducing Esri?
Yeah, so obviously our information, most of it is information gathering, which we do have paper backup systems for, but obviously that end of it doesn't adversely affect an incident if it goes down. In terms of using the information, we've actually got multiple independent electronic systems, because we've got the data on the MDT as well. So we've got 2 challenges really. One is encouraging the use of multiple systems and familiarity with those systems, but also familiarity with any offline backup systems. And I think it's a really interesting point in terms of if you were able to automate everything, and if you had the capability to do that, you would quickly lose that skill, a bit like your thermal imaging camera example. So we're certainly encouraging that regular rehearsal with the backup systems, and perhaps as we get more embedded in the systems to do the likes of what you referred to, and say, okay, that system's just died, that tablet's just gone flat, what are you going to do now? and making sure that the information that we've got and the electronic systems we're using are enhancing the capabilities and just providing a helping hand rather than doing the job for them, because even as the AI improves, there'll always be that need to be able to do it yourself.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Chris. And Bart, from your point of view?
Yeah, that's the reason that I actually used the term professional in my slides. I think we should make sure that that firefighting in its whole array is seen as a craft. That's something that needs to be trained over and over again, and could be accomplished without all the gadgets. I think the only piece of technology a firefighter should always be trusting on is his SCBA, and that should be it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
probably a flashlight that would be helpful in a radio, but none of the other fancy stuff. So the thermal imaging camera is the best example I give, and one that, because we've been using them in the fire service for so long, is one that resonates as well. If you talk about that, like, hey, what do you think about thermal imaging? Well, I sometimes joke it's like your dishwasher at home. This technology, it's an annoyance if it's broken down, but you can get around it, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the dishwasher, if it's broken down, it's just a very wet cupboard, isn't it? So that's the way they do it. So I'm going to sign off now. Again, thank you for taking part. I'm going to hand over to Irene, who's got a final question. But from my point of view, it's been really interesting and insightful discussion. I think it would be nice when COVID lifts that we can get in a room and maybe do it on a face-to-face, maybe have a gin and tonic as well, just to make life a bit more comfortable. But thank you, gents. I've really appreciated it. And Irene, over to you.
Yes, the gin and tonic we can leave for the afterwards. We're still in a home schedule, so no. It was very interesting for me as well, especially being out of the field, but I always get to learn so much. My final question was actually about being formed. So you guys already have answered it, because I heard through all the conversation that you were all kind of saying the same. Technology is there, but we all need to have firefighters who are informed on technology, not only one piece of equipment that you have, but just form. And that was kind of it. I want to thank again everybody, Esri's participation that I didn't mention at the beginning. They helped us put all of this together, Natasha, of course. And I just want to say that what we're trying to do is just explain how doing this together is like how you guys work as well at fire services. You're always collaborating with each other. So that's what I think companies should do with the end users. That's also a conclusion that we always get to at the end. We're going to have another webinar on the 23rd with 3 very interesting companies as well. It's going to be FLIR. We're going to have Romeo Duscher from Auterion. So if you want to join, you'll be more than welcome. And thank you, everybody. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you for putting this together. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.